Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Thought Leaders. It's a brand new series by Leader Pro where we bring in thought leaders from their respective fields and we pick their brains on what the best practices are given today's current economic environment, but also what themes and trends do they foresee in the next 6 months, year, a few years to come. And today we have Mary Grothe, CRO with a ton of experience and expertise in sales and marketing. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Mary.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a very topsy-turvy journey. It has been one giant roller coaster. My story is very public, so if anybody ever wanted to dig and learn more, it's plastered all over the internet. So please go help yourself. But the short version for the purpose of this interview today, I had an opportunity to enter corporate America when I was 22 years old as a district sales assistant and quickly rose the ranks. I went into the mid-market sales team at 24, became the number one sales rep. That year, the claim to fame was I had a quota of 150,000 and I sold 758,000 that year, which is more than number two and three combined. And then the second year outperformed that. I then left and worked for one of my clients as a VP of sales and marketing. It was my first chance, I was only 27 years old, to figure out what it meant to sit in an executive seat and scale a company. So in 7 short months, we quadrupled the size of the company, and I fell in love with that kind of work. And I said, I want to do this for a living. So at 28, I became a CEO and I took a stab at entrepreneurship, business ownership. Did that for 3 years, worked as a business strategist, helping companies who are very early stage get their business plan and go to market plan put together and take them out to market. After 3 years, I closed it down, went back to the payroll and HR company, sold millions, sold in the up market, and took a six-figure commission check, started my second company. When I did that, being a founder CEO the second time around, had a little bit more wisdom and maturity. I'm still learning today, but I knew a little bit more the second time than the first time. That company really took off, and it was an incredible run. We got it up to 5 million in revenue and 28 people in about 4 years. I was able to exit a year and a half after that milestone. But one of my clients is where I work now. So P&I, Payroll Network Inc., is a 25-year-old national payroll provider. Obviously, I love the payroll industry. I keep bouncing in and out of it. But they were a client of mine in 2020, a client of my firm's. And I heard nothing but great things about this company. So when they came back as a second time client in 2022, I was pretty burnt out and exhausted as a CEO. And I said, this looks pretty attractive. I'm going to take the contract on this. So I was the fractional CRO, fell in love, said, I think I want to take a stab at being a full-time chief revenue officer, something I had not done. And so I took that full-time role about a year and a half ago. And it's been an incredible journey getting to oversee marketing, sales, and revenue operations for P&I.
Super interesting. Awesome introduction. Want to dive into a little bit more of like your backstory and kind of how you ended up where you are today, and then we'll focus a little bit more about the best practices as you think as
Mhm.
it comes back to some of the key topics that we're talking about. But you mentioned that you started off kind of like almost seems like incidentally into sales in at your early 20s, right? And you unlike I think a lot of people that go through their 20s, they don't end up necessarily finding the thing that they end up doing 20 years later or 15 years later.
Mhm.
So, what was it like? I guess walk us through a little bit of that journey of like what what drew you into that role, and then number two is like why do you think you thrive so well, even at such a young age to really I think obviously have something innate there that connected.
Yeah, well, it was pure happenstance or it was divine, whatever people want to believe. But when I was 22, I was in a bad way. I had a
Mm.
really rough, traumatic upbringing and full of alcoholism and abuse. I was trained as a classical dancer growing up. I had my sights on being a professional dancer, and academically, I was very strong when I was young. And so I thought I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get this amazing medical degree and that I can fall back on, but I'm going to go be a professional dancer. And I had dreams, I had plans, but a month before I graduated high school, I was in a really bad car accident and it took all of that away. And I didn't have at that point another plan. That was it for me. And so, unfortunately, I entered into the four darkest years of my life between age 18 to 22. I was living a very sinful life. I was mixed in with the wrong people. I had questionable job professions. I was married to an abusive ex-husband. It was bad. And when I saw an ad in a newspaper for some district sales assistant job at a payroll company, I had no idea what any of that meant. But it was a new chance at life.
Mm,
And when I interviewed for that job, that sales manager saw something in me I could have never seen in myself. I thought it was worthless. I thought I was a nobody. I didn't think I had anything good going for me, but he gave me a chance, and that job changed my life. And so when I went in and all of a sudden I'm a sales admin for the number one mid-market sales team in the country, I got to learn from the best of the best. And I had many women on that team who were wives, moms, and top 10 sales reps modeling for me what I could be in the future. Not long into the role, one of the tasks I got to complete was helping my sales manager complete commission reports.
mm,
And when I helped him complete the commission reports, one of the reps was about to earn in one check what I was set to earn in the entire year. And I
mm,
asked him just very humbly, how do I get that job? Like, I need to change my life. I need to get out of this terrible marriage that I'm in. I want to do something with my life, but I don't know what that is. And he's like, I think that you have some potential. I think that you could learn sales. You might be a natural. And so he helped me build an 18-month learning and development plan to learn the profession enough to be able to step into that seat. And I was not it, this promotion into mid-market sales was not widely accepted. I didn't have my college degree. I had never sold anything. I was a little rough around the edges. And this manager's like, no, trust me, no, trust me. I think she can really do this. And then everyone else, you can't put her in front of a CEO. No one's going to take her seriously. And I use that as motivation. So when I went into the sales role when I was 24, I had this fire inside of me. I'm like, I'm going to prove them all wrong. I can do this. And I really wanted to make something out of myself. I wanted to make a name for myself. I wanted to make money. I wanted to be successful. All these things the world says you have access to, especially here in America. And so I'm like, I'm going after it. I'm going all in. And it was this fire inside of me and relentless pursuit of doing whatever it took in order to win. And that's what I did. And I had this tremendous sales success. Like you said, not a lot of people start in a career and stay in that. 20 years later, almost 20 years later, I'm still in the profession. You know, I'm a chief revenue officer now, but I still live in the sales world. I get to oversee 21 salespeople and 3 managers. And it's an absolute dream and a privilege to have this because as a leader now of all the life that I've lived, and trust me, I had several years of not doing it what I would consider to be the right way, in a way of class and integrity and really honoring the people I was working with. I was a little bit of a monster in my 20s. And I now have a lot of young sales professionals that are on my team. I'm like, wow, what an opportunity that I get to be the leader for them and help shape and mold their careers. But I absolutely love the sales profession.
that's such an amazing story. That definitely, I would say, like a lot of founders that I've met, as well as entrepreneurs. I think sales is very entrepreneurial in its nature
Yes.
too, right? Like, I mean, people will give you playbooks, but as long as you're hitting quotas or exceeding quotas, they really don't care what you're doing. So it's a lot of it. It's like you have to kind of go out there and really experiment with things and be creative on your own, right? And
Mhm.
I do think that there is something to be said around like coming from your childhood and maybe like this more of a tough upbringing and how that impacted and influenced you in terms of like feeling like your back was against the ropes and almost like that act of desperation to claw your way out of it and like
Mhm.
trying anything and everything to figure it out. I think you get the most creative in those kinds of situations, right? And I'm
Yes.
sure like and I want to dive into this next, which is like you went from, having this corporate role and obviously making a very progressive name for yourself after a certain number of years, and then you decided to, try your hand at entrepreneurship truly,
Yeah.
and this is becoming a founder. Big leap, right? A lot of risk associated to it. It's a different
Mhm.
animal, because sales and marketing is now one component of it. Obviously, it's a big part of growing a business, but it's also then like productizing and systems and people and how do you manage and all that stuff. So what was that experience like going through it the first time around? And obviously you had
Mhm.
two versions of that. And then what did you learn from that the second time around when you decided to go back into it?
I often speak from a place of humility, but full transparency. I felt invincible in my 20s. I was so successful at the payroll company, and then leaving that to be the VP of sales and marketing for that small accounting firm, being able to quadruple the size of a company in 7 months. My ego was so inflated, my head was so big. And when I started my first company, there was an arrogance about me that I think carried me through the hardship, and I didn't have the fear. I could bet on myself all day long. But you see, in my 20s, I was a survivalist and I was not the most fun person to be around. I was, as I've stated previously, a bit of a monster. And so I had this ego that helped guide me through, but it was really a mask and it was a way to protect myself from getting hurt. And the other component of it is I grew up never feeling good enough. I grew up with so many holes and wounds inside of me of not feeling love and thinking that I had any value, that I turned into this overachiever that was constantly overperforming to get awards, accolades, titles. I needed everyone and everyone to validate me as a human. And so I really did put my best foot forward. And I think I produced absolutely incredible work. The problem is, that's not very healthy the way that it was being done. And I don't think that I was the nicest person to be around. Yes, I got results, but I think people probably just wanted to throw up in their mouth when they were experiencing me and listening to the words coming out of my mouth. There's so much ego behind it. And truly, just I cared so much what people thought about me. And I used praise and acknowledgement as the drug and the hit and the high to heal my heart. But unfortunately, that's not what's going to heal it. So the first time around when I went to start my business, I didn't have any fear or any doubt. I looked at what I had accomplished. I thought I was invincible. And it's so interesting because I believe that that adrenaline rush that was behind that put blinders on, and I didn't see a lot of the risk and the scary things out of the gate. But I was also a solopreneur. I also had no overhead except for my paycheck. I was able to operate through word of mouth. I didn't even have a website or business cards. I was able to just pass along information. I'd be at networking events. My clients loved me. They would refer me to the next person, to the next person. So truly operated under the radar. Where that ego started to impact me, I couldn't scale it.
Yeah.
I couldn't delegate. I couldn't build a team. I had this mindset that nobody can do the work as good as I can. Why would I train? I used to say such terrible things. Why would I waste my time training up somebody else that I then have to manage who's never going to be able to do it like I can do? I mean, that was my mentality. But then I ran myself into this exhaustion and burnout and realized, like, wait a second, this isn't any way to live life. Also, I was battling with alcohol during the time. Like, I couldn't get a personal relationship right in my life to save me. And it was this work hard, play hard mentality. A lot was just wrong in that season. And yet here I am, a CEO at 28 years old, business seemingly successful on paper for being a solopreneur. And it was a lot of look at me, look at me. But the challenge that came in the business is that I couldn't delegate. And it became so difficult. And I just got so burnt out and tired. I ended up closing it down. A lot also happened. I hit rock bottom during that. I mean, my story is everywhere. I'm happy to go into that if you want. I turned my life around, went back to the payroll company. I mean, and that was all part of rebuilding my life.
Got it. I mean, I do. We can speak lightly about it, but I think like entrepreneurship is one of those things that will definitely kick your ego ass and get it out of the way. 'Cause what ends up happening is the market will dictate, and if you're not able to have the humility to listen and take the feedback loops and be able to iterate on those cycles, obviously it makes it very, very difficult to scale anything. So, I mean, I would be curious,
Agreed.
like, going through that first time, battling perhaps some of the more personal things, but also just the idea of ego in that professional environment as a solopreneur, right? Like, um,
Hmm.
what and to me, I look at failures as learnings, right? So, like, what were like the biggest takeaways from having to shut that down versus outside, obviously, the burnout and all those things, but like that you would say
Hmm.
have influenced or impact you in terms of how you manage teams today, how you look at maybe processes and maybe how you look at growing
Hmm.
your rev team, sales team on a more holistic level. Anything you can bring, like, definitively, almost like looking back at that time that shaped this part of my vision.
Round one to round two, I built nearly identical businesses 2 times in a row. Here were the distinct differences. The first round, I worked with startups and entrepreneurs who struggled to have capital or money to pay for services. And that was also one of the issues that I had from a scalability standpoint. One, I couldn't scale me, but two, the business struggled from a financial standpoint because there's a lot of really incredible founders and entrepreneurs who was my ideal client profile, but they just didn't have the cash flow or the funds to truly pay me what I was worth for the work that I was doing. Second time business, when I started the company the second time, I went up market slightly. I had to have my entrepreneur clients, founder clients, had to have at least 1 million in ARR before they could work with me. They needed to have runway, they needed to have cash flow, they needed to have product market fit, at least some semblance of it, before I was able to take them on as a client. The second thing that I did, learning from the first time around, was to identify what role I was going to play in the company. Very quickly on the second time around, I set a very early goal. I'm going to be a fractional VP of sales for 3 companies in that $1 to $3 million range. I'm going to get a POC, the proof of concept of what this service is, and I'm going to use this period of time to build my methodology, the playbooks, the templates, the infrastructure for the business that can then be put in rinse and repeat next time around. The first time around, everything that I built was custom to every single client. The amount of time, energy, and work that went into these custom projects, I'm like, that's not scalable. Second time around, I used the first 3 months and my first 3 clients to build all of that. So by the time I was able to grow the company, because they were all referring, I did the speaking engagement, we got more clients. Now I had a vision. I knew who I wanted to add to my team. Also, I went up market, so they were paying a reasonable rate that created enough cushion in the business to hire somebody else to take on the next client, take on the next client. But I brought in some scalability because we built the materials ahead of time and the methodology and the playbooks and the templates and all that, so that it was a little bit easier from a delivery standpoint to roll it out to the market. And so those were some of the differences that I had between the two businesses that immediately unlocked more growth opportunity from the first time around.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And with this vision the second time around, it seems like you had very clear objectives and milestones of how you were going to tackle it. Would you say that that was like a result of a reflection from that first time, or was it also through that experience the first time around, and then that intermittent work experience you had, maybe growing personally, and
All of it.
all of it together is kind of okay.
All of it. I mean, I had to grow up. I had to mature. I totally turned my life around. I mean, I was kind of a hellion in my 20s. After my rock bottom, I gave my life to the Lord. I changed everything. I had a new marriage. I had a whole new way of living and being. I honored people in a way that I hadn't before. I took care of my customers and the people around me. They experienced me differently. I'm just a better human today than who I was in my 20s. And as an entrepreneur and a founder CEO, I think I made it a lot further by being a good human versus that ego driven, arrogant ugh, person I was in my 20s. And I think we built an incredible business. I think that we brought on fantastic talent. We had incredible team members. I think we had incredible clients and we did remarkable work. And so we had that perfect equation, but I needed those 3 years to grow up.
Yeah.
I needed those 3 years to get right with myself personally so that I could be brilliant as an entrepreneur. Because I think entrepreneurs, you will run out of steam. You can't give what you don't have. And I had to get right before I could have a really good, healthy, successful business.
Yep, absolutely. Um, I mean, you speak on a lot of things that's kind of I've been thinking about recently, which is, the mental health of a lot of these entrepreneurs and founders, which I think, 76% of them are dealing with some kind of mental health issues, but like I think it's only less than 10% that publicly make it addressable. So they're struggling in silence, right? And I think it's because
Mhm,
of this weird dichotomy um of like having to almost be the captain of a ship to all your employees, but if you're taking outside capital, you're also like serving a board. And so you're like playing in this middle silo, almost like solo alone of
mhm,
acting like you know everything and have all the answers, but then struggling, obviously, because you don't know all the
mhm,
answers. Nobody does. And then having to then serve to the board, some of the struggles was like, what do I say and how do I handle all these things? Um,
mhm,
so that being said, you mentioned in part of what I was really interested in about your background is the faith component into it. And you mentioned and you alluded
Hmm.
to the after your first run-in, and then before you started the next venture. I'm curious as to how you think about you kind of mentioned some of the characteristics of what you realize from faith and how you treat other people, and you treat your customers and the certain perspective that you carry over, and that's helping you win. Um, how do you think about it now, like as a CRO, right? Back for a
Hmm.
25-year almost like legacy company,
Hmm.
running teams, right? That may or may not be fully aligned always with the same, belief system as you are, but like how do you take your faith, and how do you carry that over to, this to your process for sales or hitting quotas in what I don't think like necessarily always aligns, right? Like I don't think people
Right.
typically always think of like sales and ethics and morality like always like combined as like this healthy living
Mm-mm.
mechanism, right? So curious as to how do you approach it?
Yes. Well, I'm going to give you a slightly expanded answer because it will help it make sense. When I became a Christian, I went back to the Fortune 1000 payroll and HR company and to the same team, the same manager, the same everything, the same territory. And they knew me as my old self, but I was a changed woman. And
Mm,
back in the day, I mean, those people I worked with, we would mock Christianity. We definitely spoke down about it. It was something easily to make fun of. It was not good. So as a changed woman and in coming back, I was really open with my manager when he was reconsidering bringing me or considering to bring me back on the team. And I was very honest with him. I'm a very different woman. And I think that that really took him by surprise. But I knew coming back into that role, I did not want to be full of hypocrisy. I did not want to be another Christian that's like, oh, I love the Lord, and then partake in all the sinful behavior and the same antics. And I just didn't want to say one thing and be something different. I think that's a big problem with Christianity and why a lot of people turn away from it. And they look at it and they're like, if that's Christianity, I don't want anything to do with it. And I refuse to be that type of Christian. So for me, when I had to figure out for the first time at 30 years old, how do I bring my faith into the workplace? My answer for 3 years was I didn't speak about it. I just was it. And
mm,
what I wanted to do was demonstrate what faith meant to me. And that was loving people, being kind to them, extending grace and mercy when people didn't deserve it, as it had been extended to me. It was speaking from a place of love. It was giving people the benefit of the doubt. It was self control. It was holding my tongue. It was being selfless. It was being patient and gracious. There were so many things that I never was that I started to bring in. And my goal was that people would experience it and say, there's something different about her. What is it? That's the invitation then privately where I can open up a conversation. Well, that worked extremely well. At least I thought. So then I start my second company. Well, now I own the thing and I am the HR department when I'm owning my second company. So I became very outspoken about my faith. I had scripture hanging on the wall. I was constantly posting about it and very vocal. And so people knew who and what I stood for, but I think they tolerated it because I was not a hypocrite, because the same person who's saying all those things did all of those things. And I said, I'm going to hold myself to the highest standards because of my faith. And I'm going to treat people in a way, whether they work for me forever or they don't, I want them to look back on this chapter and say, that was the best employer I ever had. And I knew I could do it by harnessing the things that I believed in. So then it gets better. So I sell that company. I go take a full time job as a chief revenue officer. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't own this company and there is an HR department. So I have to like go back and reevaluate, how do I bring my faith into the workplace? And what has been tremendously successful in this walk in the last year and a half has been going back. Like, I want to be very honoring of other people's beliefs. And I don't quote scripture. I don't come in like bringing my Bible to work and saving souls on lunch breaks. Like, if somebody needed that, they could reach out to me. But it is just walking the talk. And
mm,
I have had almost nearly all of my direct reports in some way, shape, or form privately affirm what it's like to work for me and how different it is from anywhere else that they've worked, how I have the highest integrity standards, how caring I am, patient, calm, understanding, merciful, gracious, these things that I don't think a lot of leaders have those qualities. So sometimes people get freaked out when they hear the word faith or religion. And well, what does that mean? It's like, man, at the core of it, we're supposed to love our neighbor. And if I get to do that in a leadership position, I think everybody wins. And
Hmm.
so that's how I bring faith into the workplace. That's how I rest. One specific example is how I deal with conflict. 10 years ago, I could fly off the handle. I mean, I just would have such a short fuse. I always took things personally. I would feel so wronged, and it would just get bringing these like fiery, passionate responses or reactions. But now I don't do that. And I realize that life is what they say 10% of what happens to you and 90% how you react to it. And I think that there's a difference in the reaction and the response. And as a leader in corporate America, we have our challenges, we have disagreements, we have friction. But if I can meet all of those conversations with love, grace, kindness, mercy, patience, self control, remarkable things happen. So, that for me is what I believe it means to be a faith based leader. And I haven't heard any complaints.
It's a great answer. Very interesting. I think like also kind of diving into a little bit more of the weeds. I think of what does it mean to be a chief revenue officer now at this company? Like, what is your day to day, and what are you being measured on? And I ask this more so just
Mhm.
from what is the tangible outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and then I'll have another follow-up question, but like how does faith then like integrate into that
Mhm.
into the process of delivering on those outcomes? But yeah, first of all, just
Yes.
with CRO, what are you delivering on? What are you measured on? And
Mhm. Well, I'm spoiled. So I just want every other CRO listening to this know that I'm spoiled. We are not publicly traded. We don't have venture capitalists. We don't have private equity investors. We have no investors. We're owned today by the same founders who founded us 26 years ago. And those founders are some of the most kind, gracious men I've ever met and business leaders. They're just truly full of love and they're incredible. This company didn't grow to be this successful because we had a couple of jerks at the helm. These two are absolutely incredible. And it has carried down into the current leadership team and executive team. And I'll tell you exactly what it means to be a CRO for this company and how I'm spoiled. When I initially came in, I worked with the president and CFO to build a really big, hairy, audacious sales budget. And
mm,
I said I was going to do 4 million in this fiscal year, which would have been 2 or 3x of what the company has ever done historically in net new sales in a given year. That ego kind of crept back in, and I was like, Mary Grothe, you can do anything. So I came in, I talked a big talk, I had this big vision, I asked for a lot of budget that they so graciously gave me, and I go to town and I'm like, we are going to crush this $4 million sales budget. Well, first quarter of the fiscal year, we were 48% of goal. And my president, she's an amazing human. She quietly pulled me aside and she's like, do you think we need to adjust the goal? And it brought tears to my eyes because for most CROs, this is where they get fired. So I was really grateful that so much grace was extended to me. And I'm thinking to myself, you really are going to let me redo this, pull my tail between my legs, and say that this was completely overstated and we did not hit the mark on all the components in the plan in order to produce? And she was like, we love having you here. We think you bring a lot of value and we want to retain you. We need you to be happy. We got to realize this goal might be overstated. So let's work together to lower the goal, make it more realistic. Let's refine the plan so we're very clear on what we need to execute and let's manage to that. So step number one, I'm like, that is unheard of and it's incredible. So we dropped the goal down to 2.3 and I'm like, okay, this is much more reasonable. And that's just, I run just the commercial side of sales. We have a government contracting side as well. But that's not in this number, but I'm like, okay, we can do this. And so in this 2.3, I oversee the sales team, marketing, revenue operations. I work hand in hand with the COO so that we can be paired up and cover the entire customer life cycle and ensure that the customer experience is second to none, something that was built in passionately from our founders that we need to continue even as we grow. So now I have this adjusted sales number, gave me some breathing room, and it allowed our team to really focus and execute on the go-to-market motions that mattered, that we're getting the return. And that has been a dream. So we're knocking on the door of an upcoming fiscal year. FY25 for us starts in July 1. We're in budget planning season right now. So now we have a playbook that I believe we can copy paste. We've added a third region. We're expanding across the United States. We have the sales playbook. We have the marketing playbook. We have our revenue engine built. And so we're much clearer on what that goal and metric is going to be. So at the core, I am held to a top line revenue growth number for net new sales. Also, we're looking at a certain amount of retention of our clients and a certain amount of company revenue growth overall. And so I get to have a hand in all of that, which is great that those are the metrics that I'm held accountable to. But I'm just so grateful to work for a company that truly honors their people and honors the customer experience and doesn't grow past the ability to retain really great people and also retain the customers and provide a pretty fantastic experience. So as a CRO, that's what I'm held accountable to.
Awesome. Um, a quick question here. Obviously, you kind of mentioned the different departments that you oversee, from sales, marketing, ops to customer success. And so is there a particular
Mhm.
place that you feel like is the root of, um, for you to divide your time, but like, is the root of like how you prioritize some of that time? I know some focus on top of funnel and the marketing, go to market motions, really honing in on
Mhm.
ICPs, meaning, who can they service actually today, and like, and what's actually obtainable, versus some are really focused on that customer success part and like using referral
Mhm.
groups and that kind of thing. But is there any particular department where you feel like you spend a larger chunk of time and it's kind of like the crux of your guys' go-to-market?
Yes, I spend the majority of my time with the sales team, and there's a reason. So one, that is my predominant background and specialty, and I love sales. I love everything about sales. So it's a preference for me to be involved more heavily in sales as an executive sponsor. I'm also a keynote speaker. I run our preferred broker program. I handle our larger, most complex clients. That's what I did the last 3 years. I was at the other payroll company. I worked in the up market. And so I was instrumental in selling, bringing on and implementing multi-thousand employee accounts. So when we have those at our current company, that's my jam. I'm very technical. I love implementation. I love data mapping fields, APIs, integrations, and doing these massive rollouts. So I very specifically am more ingrained in the sales side because those are some of my superhuman talents. And I think that that's what helps move the team forward. I only have the opportunity to do that because I have an absolutely unbelievable right hand who's our head of revenue marketing, and she oversees revenue operations, brand marketing, and she is exceptional. One of the most talented revenue marketing leaders I have ever met in my career. And so I couldn't do what I'm doing and put this much focus on the sales side if I didn't have her. She's absolutely one of a kind. She's a unicorn, and she has built up everything in our revenue engine, everything in the marketing side. And so I get to do all of these components in sales because I have her. If I didn't have her in that seat, I would definitely be pulling out of the amount of time and energy that I'm putting into sales. But I'm very spoiled at this moment in time. I also have a full time RevOps specialist who is an absolute guru in our tech stack. And so I am surrounded by brilliant people. On top of that, I have 3 exceptional regional sales managers. So I have the dream team. I mean, I talked about I'm spoiled here. Not every chief revenue officer can sit in this seat and say these things about the opportunity that they have. So I know that I'm spoiled. I also, last but not least, our chief operating officer. He oversees all of implementation and support, and he's been doing a tremendous job. And so for me, having a counterpart at the executive level that I can trust, that we can speak the same language, that we're working toward a common goal, that we can be direct, transparent, and just have the humility to call out the ugly when we need to and partner together for great outcomes. Again, another element where I'm spoiled. I used to not be able to say all these nice things about where I've worked, but this is a true privilege for me in this stage of my career.
I mean, I do think it's a testament though to who you are as a person too at this point, right? I think like
Thank you.
people who end up getting spoiled probably deserve a little bit of that because of what they've put out there. And I think just kind of, for those that are listening to this, that the way that you just explained your journey from your early part of your career to now is very easy to understand, to kind of like see that there has to have been a 180, because what we're seeing now is drastically different from what you explained before. And I think it's also to that point of whether it was, faith or going through whatever personal experience you went through to get to this point, it was instrumental in that. And so, um, I am curious, is like going from exiting your last company to now like managing people again, not your own company necessarily, but you have seems like quite a bit of flexibility there. How much do you feel like, going back to the faith question, is like that faith has helped you in terms of those interpersonal relationships within the workplace that maybe it has afforded you the ability to become spoiled a little bit, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, because I do believe that how you treat others, how you treat your neighbors comes back typically tenfold. And you seem to have invested into that ideology quite a bit. So I'm curious if you ever thought about it, taking a step back and be like, you know what? These people are here working for me in this way because I found this or I'm doing this differently.
Yes. So my pendulum has swung so far the other way. It would be very difficult for me to say like, oh yeah, because I show up like this, these people, like I don't want the ego in it at all. But
Sure,
I
sure.
do believe, and these are God's promises. This is what's in the scripture. I mean, Proverbs is such a book of wisdom. And when I read in there, and it specifically is my guidebook to tell me how to be an honorable human being who then, because of those actions, is more likely to receive honorable circumstances, outcomes, actions back to them, right? So it's one of those that, whereas that's not my expectation because we live in a fallen world and humans are humans and I make mistakes all the time too. But it's an opportunity for me to just rest in those promises that if I love thy neighbor, and that's it's everybody in my life and in my community, and then there should then be an opportunity to pull some of that heaven down and have it on earth. And I do believe that it is because of this leadership team. And I'm not alone. I'm probably the most bullish on my faith and just outspoken about it. But the people in this executive team, like, these are good human beings. And it is coming from the top. All of our new hires that come on board, yeah, I tell them in the interview process, but then one of the first things they do after their first week of onboarding, they're like, you weren't lying. Everybody here is amazing and they all love their job. Like, what is going on? And I said, it's just, I think, who we are as human beings and where our heart is. But the faith component is critical. It also gives me an area to gut check myself because I still am obviously a human. I live in a fallen world. I have flesh. I am challenged like many. I still have a competitive spirit. I love to win. I do have my ego. I want to look back on this chapter of my life and I want the people that I work with to look back and be like, we won and we crushed it and we did amazing. We are so good. But it's just the frame of reference is like, can we put our North Star as taking care of people and loving people and being kind and honoring to them? And then also get all of those great outcomes? Can we put the first and then receive the others because we were good human beings as we did it? But having faith as the center of it, it's guiding for me for everything in all that I do. I couldn't imagine what I'll rephrase that. I'm so far removed. I'm 10 years removed from how I used to live my life. I never want to live another day of what that used to be. I never want to experience again. It was hell. I lived through hell. And the simple lifestyle and nature of it left me so empty and so dead on the inside. And nothing was ever enough. I was never fulfilled. And I never believed I was enough or good enough. And that is a really sad way to get through life. And on the other side of it now, like, look at what I have. I didn't give up everything in corporate America. I didn't, wasn't called into full-time ministry or like, I'm going to go evangelize. God has me here still for a reason. I think he's positioned a lot of leaders who love him in these leadership positions all throughout corporate America on purpose to bring a lot of this love and light into the workplace. So as long as he has me in the seat, it is such an honor and a privilege to be a good human being and model what that looks like. And then I think so much goodness comes from it.
Yeah, absolutely. On that note, we are on time, so I just want to ask one last question here, which is if there anybody listening in terms of like, salesperson or somebody that's just starting off in RevOps, for example, or struggling,
Mhm.
in their own way for whatever reason, whether it's hitting numbers, not feeling like they're worth enough because they're not hitting numbers, etc., like whatever it might be, any piece of advice, and this can come from your personal faith or it can just come from, what
Mhm.
it's done for you in terms of like how to maybe take a different perspective, how do you how would what would you suggest for them, an actionable thing,
Mhm.
so that they can maybe reposition themselves?
I have to just call it what it is. Sales and revenue roles are not for everyone.
Yeah.
And we do sometimes have mismatches. People just aren't cut out for it. It is a very special skill set to be able to thrive and succeed in a revenue role, whether that's rev ops side of it, if it's sales specifically, marketing. So much of marketing now, especially in scale up organizations, marketing doesn't have the time and space to sit and be measured by things other than how did this drive revenue, which is difficult for a lot of marketers. Like you can go be brilliant in marketing for a company that might be in a more mature state where they are not looking for every single action in marketing to be associated to driving revenue, right? So there's a lot of stress and pressure in certain stages of companies in revenue roles. And when I encounter people, which I've encountered many of them in my career, that are feeling down on themselves or not feeling cut out for it, it is an opportunity to look on the inside and truly ask, like, is this the right role for you? Is this the right profession for you? Because it takes a tenacity and resilience that other roles inside of companies don't require.
Mhm.
So that is gut check number one. And I'm okay to call it out. Like, if it is really that hard on you, and if you're really feeling that defeated, or you're just like, I mean, look, I'm surrounded by some pretty incredible teammates. And I see the joy inside of them, even when they lose a deal. Yeah, it hurts and it stinks, and we reflect. But I see the hunger, and they're like, I'm not going to let it bring me down. I'm going to learn from it, and I'm going after the next one. And then I have seen people in my career where that rejection or losing a deal or not, it's just so defeating. And I'm like, okay, maybe we need to look at something a little bit different. So maybe that's not the answer people were expecting to come out of my mouth. But as a leader, I also feel that it's my responsibility that people are in the right roles, and that God created us so uniquely, gave us brilliant talents. But if we're not in a role where we can execute those talents and play to our strengths, we're probably always going to be underneath that level of pure joy. And so there might be a lot of desire to be in a revenue type role, but that may not be the fit for everybody. So that's the first place I'd gut check. Short answer on the second is I struggled a lot with never feeling good enough. And without preaching here, there's a lot that could be offered in that. And healing that wound, filling up that hole. And right now I could fail, and I don't care, because I know that I'm loved, and I know that I'm worthy, and I know I was created with intention and purpose, and I will learn from it and I will do better next time, but that's not going to take me out of the game.
Well said. Well, Mary, thank you so much for your time today. It was very inspirational, very enlightening, and it was a different take, and it was exactly what I was hoping it would be. So, thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, I wish you nothing but a great weekend and have an amazing time with your friends and your family.
Thank you so much for having me.